Yeah, get him a ball.
Oh yeah, and Nick lost his tooth.
He showed me.
Excited. He didn't want to put it under the
Yeah, see?
He didn't want to put it under his pillow
He
yet.
brought it in the can here.
So he wanted to
I apologize for not getting poinsettias ordered this year.
It's okay. I need to get him out of the
I had.
Yes.
It was laying there. And then
I'm in it right
I don't know what happened. I went to the hospital for
Okay,
one
hang
thing.
on here. Okay, to the
Stopped
detail.
it.
Okay.
You know, well, they had 3 more stints on sale, so I decided to get them.
Oh,
The,
you're kidding me. Did they seriously?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got 6.
Get in there. Okay. I'm in there.
That's where I was when it was due, and I was supposed to put the order in it, and I just.
Very
No. And Mom ordered a bunch,
Wait
which
a
was
minute.
great.
Here.
But I've been having to babysit them while they're
I'm
in
sorry.
Arizona. And they can be finicky,
Yeah.
to be honest. And they were beautiful right when we got them, because we got them right from the wholesaler.
Oh, they were really nice last year.
They're gorgeous. So,
Well, I'm in.
Moms
I'm
aren't
in
so
the,
nice right now.
the detail sheet for the 99 box trailer.
Been doing my best. Did Dad tell you
Yes.
Bella Owen
Yes.
diagnosed with autism?
Yeah.
We've been a little busy.
When was this?
Ah! Oh, you're kidding me.
In October.
October.
And then we went up for a second
You're
opinion
kidding me.
December 1st up at Cleveland. And he's got a speech
Okay, hang on
complication.
here. Okay.
So that's
Wow.
yeah. But you've been doing a lot better.
You're
haven't
right.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's doing pretty good.
Hang on.
Ball?
And just
Do you
take
have
out
the
that
ball? You
motor
do.
code.
That
And
was
let
his
me
word
do
for
a
ball.
view. Oh, I
A
clicked
ball.
myself, huh? It's there.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
starts with Dublin schools.
I've seen some
Okay.
students that I go to their house on.
Thank you.
Are
There
you?
you go.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
All right. So, do you want to introduce yourself and possibly your hobby that's all behind you?
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Hi, Max Amrine, Buckeye fan. Most of these pictures are about the 2002 championship. I don't know what else to say. Except there's a lot of dollars on the wall. And Michelle gets them. So, the daughter.
Okay. So, how long have you lived in Marysville?
Since when? I mean, we were born in 43. Jim and I, so. There you go.
Yeah. I guess you could say Max lived in Marysville for 18 years, then left for 20 when he joined the Navy. And
Yep.
spent a career and resigned from the Navy, and then moved back and has been here ever since.
Yes.
So that would make it from 38 to 60. How old are we? 67?
We're 66.
Almost 67. So 38.
66 minus 18 years.
Yeah.
Or minus 20 years, excuse me, in the Navy. 20 years.
Yeah.
Been in this house since 1981.
Yeah.
And what's your relation to Jim Gray?
Second cousin.
And oh, go on.
Okay, through our grandfathers.
Our grandfathers were brothers.
Yes.
And so you go ahead and name
we
your
all-
grandfather.
Well, mine was George and yours was Arthur. And
Amrine.
Their father was Willis Amrine, which I guess we're going to the cemetery today. I'll show you where his stone is. Can you stop it? Just
Yeah,
a second.
sure.
I'm sorry to know you were dating.
How old are you?
5.
5! Oh, happy birthday! Did you have fun at that gym the other day? With all the kids?
Oh, we had
Wow.
such a fun birthday party. I'm
just
so glad we had it.
You was
It like
running
a
and
little
running,
gym
weren't you?
place.
Huh?
I
Yeah.
had tons of stuff for all the
I
kids.
think you're going to be the fastest
Bubbles.
person in the family.
Yeah, she's pretty quick, isn't she?
Yeah, she's going to be fastest person, I think. Faster than her mother, too. And Dad. Trust me.
And so, you know what? You know how they timed him? It wasn't with the stopwatch. They went. Let's see if he moves past this. You know.
So anyhow, okay.
Okay.
Willis is our great grandfather, and he's the first one buried in Oakdale Cemetery. And previous to that, they're all in the Amrine Cemetery.
And Oakdale Cemetery is the main cemetery
in Marysville,
for
Ohio.
Marysville, Ohio, and he was the first person buried in Oakdale. Willis Amrine.
In our family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is the farthest back you know of the Amrines in Union County?
In Union County is 1817, I believe. Abraham came and started well, he moved here in 1817 with all his sons except one. My mind went blank. And he first went from Philadelphia, or from Pennsylvania, to Belmont County. Okay, and like in 1803 or something. And in 1817, he came to Union County, to the settlement just north of Marysville. And one son remained in Belmont, and then he enticed him to come up, and they started a wood mill, or a sawmill, on Mill Creek.
And before that, so before Philadelphia, how does the lineage go back into Europe?
1751, the first Amrine, Johann, I believe is his first name, came to the U.S. from in the area of Germany, Switzerland, back there, and he had 7 sons in Pennsylvania, the oldest of which was Abraham. And Abraham brought his sons to Ohio. The other sons, spread out. I mean, some went south, some went west, etc.
And do we know they came in to Philadelphia?
They came through Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was back in the days when Pennsylvania was trying to get inhabitants, more people, and so that's how that all came about. A lot of people came into Pennsylvania first through Philadelphia.
And so, what year did you say they came into Ohio?
I believe it was 1803.
Okay, so it was before Ohio was even a state. It was just a territory.
Around that same time. Yeah, somewhere
it was
in
a
that.
territory.
Yeah. Well, Ohio became a state in 1803, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, and officially in 1953.
Well, yeah.
What? 1953?
Somebody forgot to sign the papers to make it a state. I'm serious.
But they went to Belmont County first, in Ohio, and then they came to Union County. So, and then Abraham was a Revolutionary War soldier. So he bought, I want a section of land. I think up to 640 acres, I believe, back in those days. And that's where the Mill Valley housing is right now. So,
where did he fight in the Revolution?
I don't have any history of where he actually fought. He was like a private. I do know that. And I'm in the Sons of the American Revolution because of him. And the daughter's in the DAR, and the kids are in the CAR, Children of the American Revolution. So.
So how's the connection between Amrine and Grace?
Okay,
you said the
great-grandpa Willis had 2 sons.
It's on my grandfather's side.
Yes.
My mom's father.
Yeah.
My mom was an Amrine.
Okay. Yeah, great-grandpa Willis had 2 sons and 4 daughters, I believe. Nettie, Lottie, Irene, and Elzina.
Yeah.
Okay. And the 2 sons were Arthur, Jim's grandpa, and George, my grandpa. So.
And then, so just talk about the various branches, just starting there, and any of the sons and daughters that you can talk about, any stories where you think they are now.
Well,
we know where a lot of them are.
Off of Willis, the two of the daughters, Nettie and Lottie, had no children.
That's right.
Irene, her eventual name was Lee, had 3 sons.
She married Dewey Lee.
Yeah, married Dewey Lee, and had 3 sons, Lewis, Luttrell, and Donald.
Donald.
Yeah, and they have all passed away. Now, Donald and Lewis had no children. So now Luttrell had 2 children. Gary
and Sharon.
and Sharon. Gary, of course, lives here in Marysville as the county commissioner, and Sharon lives in California.
And Gary and his daughters now farm land that was owned by the Amrines. Part of that was by the Amrines up there, and they probably farm, what, 2,000 to 3,000 acres around here?
That'd be my
They
guess.
own and farm.
Be my
So
guess.
Gary and his son do that.
2 sons.
Yeah, they still farm about 3,000 acres here. And like I said, a lot of that land was owned by the Amrines, which Dewey and them, you know, they're still farming.
Yeah.
Which is good. And that's what everybody in the family were farmers.
That's
Your
correct.
grandfather was a farmer. My grandfather was a farmer, and my grandfather concentrated. I think yours concentrated on grain products, right?
Yeah, mainly.
My grandfather concentrated on hogs, and was becoming a pretty big hog farmer, and lived on Belleville Road, which is between here and Raymond, just off of Raymond Road on Belleville Road, and that's where he lived. And then, of course, he married Anna Rachel Shirk, and that's how became related to all the Shirks that are in Union County and everything. And then they had, my grandfather Arthur had 3, and Grandma Amrine had 3 children. Yeah, they had 4. The first one was Verna, and then Lawrence, and Lawrence died at about 2 months after childbirth. And then there was Kenneth, and then there was my mother, Florence, and she was born in 1919. And then she died in 72. And Arthur died in his 30s of spinal meningitis that he contracted at, of all places, Grant Hospital.
Right.
Yeah, but he was down there just for a minor
It
surgery.
was about 1932 or so, wasn't
Yeah.
it, when he died?
Yeah, my mom was only, oh wow, she was about 13 years old. Yeah, when her dad died. And then she met my father on the farm, because he came there to run the farm and work the farm after Arthur died. And so that's how they met.
And your parents, how did they meet?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, but they did elope. They eloped to Kentucky with another couple. Their name was Leeper. I can't remember what his first name was, but anyhow, they eloped to Kentucky, and when they came back, they didn't live together. They didn't tell anybody for a while. Now that's, so many stories that I've heard after.
That's what my mom
Yeah.
said.
But so, I think it was Louis that said, "Oh, it'll never last," or something like that. I never married 71 years.
Yeah. So.
And both of them, what did they do for a living?
Mom was a housekeeper. She worked at Google's from 19.
Which is a hardware store.
Yeah, she cleaned and was a clerk for 57 through 84, and then Dad was a farmer mainly until he built the house on Route 4, about 54, and then he went to work for Scott's and he worked there for 19 years. So that's about it there. And the Amrines lived mainly before the house on Route 4, up on Wolford Maskell Road. So that's where our great grandfather had a farm, and he gave it to Forrest Amrine, which is my father's brother. And it was sold in the 70s to a gentleman named Dick Leeper. So no relation to the Leaper. They eloped with
That's what I was going to ask you. Was it related to the Leapers they eloped with your mom and dad?
No.
I think one of the ironies, and it doesn't have much to do with the heritage fact, is that his dad was called Shorty, and my dad in the military was called Shorty.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
And they were both. My dad was 5'4", is all the taller he was, and your dad was
Maybe 5'2", 3.
5'2" or 5'3". So
Jim and I didn't have a chance.
we didn't have a chance of being real tall.
So they didn't play basketball.
Oh yes, Dad did,
Oh yeah.
and Mom played ball for Canaan. It's a school down by Plain City, and she didn't graduate till she was about 21, I think, or something out of high school, because she dropped out of school a while to take care. Back in those days, the older kids took care of the houses or whatever, farm, etc. So
Yeah, my mom had to drop out of school in the 8th grade when her dad died because she had to work the farm. She didn't have a choice. It was either work the farm or go to an orphanage.
Where was she in the order of brothers and sisters?
She was the youngest of Arthur's children, which, as I said, there were 4. And she had, oldest was Verna, the sister, then Lawrence, who lived 2 months, and then Kenneth, and then her. And her name was Florence May, yeah.
So if you go down through from my grandfather George, he had 3 children. The oldest of which was Aunt Ruth, and she married a gentleman named Hughes. They lived in the Galloway, Grove City area, and then Uncle Frosty Forrest Amrine, and him and Mary had no children, and then my mom and dad had 2, my sister and I.
And your sister?
I'm the baby, Marilyn Louise.
And what year was she born?
35.
So how old? So you're the youngest.
Yeah.
And how old were your parents then when both of you were born?
Well, Mom was born in 1911, so she would have been 24 when Marilyn was born. Mm-hmm. Dad would have been 23. He was a year younger. Yeah.
And did
I was born in 43, so.
Yeah.
We were born in 43.
Yeah.
And your dad have any military service?
No, he was a farmer. No, and his age bracket was such
right
that,
between the wars.
Right in between, because he was born in 12, so he was 6 when World War I ended, and then when in 41, when we got into World War II, he would have been 29. So
did he have any stories from the Depression? Did that affect your parents at all? Do you know?
I never really got any stories from him. I just know that Mom liked cold hard cash because she'd keep any cash she had in the freezer. She never wrote a check all her life. Never had a credit card. Dad never had a credit card, but he wrote the checks. Mm-hmm. So that's, in a way, that's a carryover from the Depression.
And I think it affected people in all the same way. I remember Mom talking about, and Dad, myself, when they lived there working the farm, and they finally gave that up and moved in town. Dad became and worked in manufacturing in Marysville. But they were talking about if they had a piece of bread that was fried in grease, it was a big meal because that's all they could afford, and that the Depression hit them hard, and of course it hit her really. They were just coming out of the Depression when her dad died. Like you said, it was in 32 when
32, I believe.
my grandfather died.
Yes.
32. So it was a tough time if you were farming and everything like that. It was tough, but then things just kept getting a little better, and everybody had jobs, and then they moved into town on West 8th Street, 311 West 8th Street. Matter of fact, that's where I was born. Upstairs front bedroom. The house is still there at 311 West 8th Street. PD long break. And Max and I have been Well, close like brothers ever since we could walk.
First place I remember you living was on 3rd Street.
Is that the first place?
Right by near the Scott's house.
Well, we moved over there, yeah.
Or on 3rd Street, though.
Yeah, it's
but
gone
that area.
now. Yeah, we were renting that while the house on
Yeah.
8th Street was being built.
Yeah.
All right, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna move you over. Just a moment.
Hurt your ego.
Does hurt my ego.
Well,
Too late for that.
You're both sons of shorties.
Yeah. Well, see, and Max was called as a nickname Cigar Butt. And the way he got that was from his father.
Yeah.
Because his father always walked around with a little stub of the cigar.
Most time it wasn't lit.
It wasn't lit in the corner of his mouth. And so, because of that, we called him Cigar Butt.
Amongst other names.
Amongst other names. Grow it up.
Hold on 1 second.
If you go back to our great-great-grandfather, who's buried in the Amarine Cemetery, his name was Moses. And he had 2 different wives. Obviously, the first one died. But, I mean, he had a batch of children with the first wife. And he remarried and had another batch of children. And that's where Willis come in as that second batch. And there's nothing in the Union County history book about his second wife and their children. All right, so if I forget what that history book is called, History of Union County or something.
I think something like
but
that. Yeah.
I had a stumbling block there until I got it all figured out. And like I say, Willis was from Moses' second wife, and then Willis, when he was the second wife burned in a fire. Wow, we're trying about 1857, and Moses died in 1874, and Willis was only 15. He was brought up by another family. Aunt Mary knew who it was, and she told me one time, and I forgot. That's all. I don't know who it was. He was brought up by another family for 3 or 4 years. I mean, his name was still Amarine, obviously, but so you might run into a stumbling block when you go to study the Amarine genealogy. But all that's been traced out and everything.
And there's some spelling situations on the word, the name Amarine.
Sure.
For example, if you ask people, when people say Amarine, oh yes, Amerine, whereas Max and my mom and them, they spelled it Amrine. But someplace, somebody put an E in there.
In the
because
old
it sounds
days-
like Amarine.
Mm-hmm.
So they put an E in, and now
When you went to a clerk in the courthouse for whatever reason, they spelled phonetically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how all that came about. And I believe the original spelling was like Amhrein, because we came from the Rhine River area.
That's what I was going to ask, is what that meant.
So.
Now, I'm asking Max this because I remember my mother talking about, was there some Amarine way back, like Moses and Abraham and all that, that married an Indian woman? She had always told me that somebody had married an Indian woman down by Mill Creek.
Moses had 2 different batches
They were on
of kids.
They had a cabin on an island in Mill Creek.
Maybe.
Now, I don't know. We've never been able to prove that, but that's what my mom always said.
Yeah.
She,
Bad Dr. McIver's not alive. You can interview him.
Yeah, he knew our family better than anybody knew our family.
Yeah.
Dr. Malcolm McIver. And I think because he was the doctor for everybody in our family from the beginning of time, and before him it was his dad was the doctor, and then his dad was the doctor. So same family doctor for generations, which was really strange. And then the irony of it is when my dad started working for the government and they appointed a doctor for him. Who'd they appoint? MacGyver. It just turned out that way. But there's out on the Raymond Road, what's that stone, Max? the marker.
Yeah.
What is that for? There's a
That's for not a fort, but a defensive position against the Indians was built in that area.
and there's
yeah.
a stone
Yeah.
post of it right along the road,
Yeah.
and it's still there
Yeah.
from where they, like you said, defended themselves from the Indians.
And then where Doc McIver's farm is, across from Oakdale, is on Fifth Street.
On West Fifth
That's where
Street,
the
just where you-
Amrine Community House was, because back in those days there were a lot of Amrines. I mean, if you go back in the auditor's records and look at deeds and stuff, just browse through them. In the early 1800s, there was a lot of Amrines selling and buying land and or whatever, and most of the kids left the area. So that's why we're down to where we are right now. You know.
which is Max.
Yeah. And Jim.
Well, but I mean,
But you're the last of the Amrine name in this area?
In our strait. Yeah.
he's the last one, and will be the last one.
Yep. Yep.
And that because my uncle Kenneth Amrine was married twice, never had any children, and that was the only son that my grandfather had.
And Frosty didn't have any.
Frosty didn't have any, which is his uncle, his grandfather George's son, and Lowell had one son, which was his dad. And like we said, then the four girls, of course, they wouldn't have any Amrines.
Right.
There was, the four girls were Irene Lee, that was married to Dewey. There was Aunt Nettie Reed, and she was married to Howard Reed. There was Lottie Amrine, which is Charlotte, or Lottie, and she was married to, good, I was doing real well
Yeah,
there
you
for a
were.
minute. I was, and he...
Howard Reed.
No, that Howard Reed was Aunt Nettie.
Okay.
And Aunt Lottie Coleman was married to, and I can't remember his first name.
Well, we'll show them the markers at the cemetery. And you
it's-
can take pictures of the
It's
markers.
strange, I can't remember their name. And then Aunt Elzine,
Yeah.
and Elzina was her real name, was married to Ivan McAdow. And they lived on the Columbus Road, or what they called Columbus Pike.
Old 33.
Old 33, which is now Industrial Parkway. It was Columbus Pike, Columbus Road, Route 33, and now Industrial Parkway. And they had a farm on that. And that was all the kids. So there weren't, when we get to the Amrines back to our grandfathers, after that, there were not a lot of male Amrines
Yes.
born.
Yep.
Because
That's the way it is.
All right, so let's go by incorporating both of you. Like returning back to you talked a little bit about the 30s and the Depression era. Anything else that you remember or was happening in the 30s of who was?
Well, obviously we weren't born until 43. So but the only
all
thing,
mine is from stories
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
my grandmother and my mother and my father. And when they talked about you had tire rationing, you had cards that they gave you that you could buy gasoline for your vehicle only on certain days, and they punched your card. Maybe you were assigned Monday, so you could only go get gasoline on Monday, and that's when they punched your card. You saw the Depression era carry over, especially with my mother, because it hit my mother hard. But in the attic, as Max knows of having been up there so many times, she would have 50-pound bags of sugar. She would have 50-pound bags of flour. She hid money everywhere, even though she had money in the bank. She did use a bank, but when she died, going through her house, we found money hidden throughout the house because she wasn't going to lose it all when the banks failed again, and they just weren't going to take her. But she was a hoarder, and she had all this stuff in the attic that if it did become, because it was the same thing with flour and sugar, you had to get a card punched of when you could buy it. And it was
not uncommon for that generation to keep money at home.
and to
Because
hoard
when the banks
things.
collapsed in 29, or 30,
Yeah,
they didn't trust the banks anymore.
right.
They didn't care about inflation. That kind of conversation never even took place. The average person didn't know what inflation was back then, and so they kept money at home. I had an outhouse until I was 12 years old.
I remember the first time I went to Max's house, and I said I had to go to the bathroom, and he says, "Okay, it's right there," and it was outside, and it was an outhouse. They didn't have indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for people to comprehend that for as no older than we think we are. We don't think we're that old, but to think that, we lived through when they had no indoor plumbing. I can remember the house on West 8th Street that I not grew up very long, because like you said, I moved over to 3rd Street when I was 5, when they were building our new house up on 8th Street. But we had an outdoor water pump. We grew our own vegetables. That was the big thing. Back then, Mom would always have a vegetable garden and would can and put up green beans, potatoes, everything that you can think of in the basement. I remember my dad having to build cupboards the whole length of the basement to hold the canned goods in case something happened.
Yeah.
And she always kept referring to the term rationing, because that was the big term the government used. Everything was rationed. And that's what they did. Dad got into the WPA program. I think is it WPA? Mm-hmm. Yeah, WPA program. They gave him a job there. He was making 35 cents an hour, and he helped work on paving the Raymond Road. That was one of the jobs he had, but it was a WPA that was started by Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
The original American Legion building in Marysville,
Mhm.
part of it was built by the WPA in 32.
Yeah.
So,
One that's out by the pool and
right, the swimming pool.
And the golf course that Max and I play now, the same thing. It was built in 1932
Yep.
by people working for the WPA, giving people jobs where they can do that. Nobody got a free handout then, compared to now that
Well, there
everybody.
was no unemployment. There was no Social Security.
There was no Medicare.
Soup lines were literally soup lines.
I can remember going into Dr. Longbreak's office if you were sick on an office call. And especially since this weekend they just, they're passing that Health Reform Act. And going into Longbreak's office, and you didn't make an appointment. You just walked in to any of the doctors in town. They all made house calls if you were really sick. Walk in, and he would check you, and then he had racks of medicine and pills. And instead of writing script that then you then took to another person who got a cut of the money, from a drugstore, who then got it from that, he had little white packages or bottles, and he would pour the
give you
pills
white
in there.
packages of pills. Yeah.
Give you a package of pills, and I can still remember my dad saying, "Well, how much do you, Doc?" 50 cents. And that was for the pills, the exam, everything. It was always 50 cents.
And that continued through the 40s, really.
Yeah, it did. It continued up
When
through
we
the
were
40s.
kids, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That was happening because I was born in 43, so I can remember that. So that was in the 40s that was happening. But everybody had to work for if they were going to get anything, and they put people to work. Nobody was staying.
You had to work.
If you're going to eat, you had to work.
That's
You grew
right.
it yourself. You slaughtered your own beef and hogs and things like that if you're going to get that, or you bartered it with somebody with what you made. A lot of homemade clothes.
And generations lived together.
Yeah. And I think the biggest the thing that I remember as one of the biggest changes is, and that was caused by television. I really believe that. And we had the third television in Marysville. My dad bought it was 13-inch General Electric, and we had that on 3rd Street when he bought that. And everybody, all the neighbors would come in every night to watch TV. I think they got a station out of Chicago that showed wrestling or something. And there wasn't very little on, and Dad would even go to bed and say, well, to turn it off and turn out the lights when you leave. But all the neighbors would be there. But prior to that, you were always going to somebody's house to visit every weekend, every night.
Families were more tight.
You went uptown on Friday night. All the farmers came in on Friday night.
Friday or Saturday night, yeah.
Friday and Saturday night was big in downtown Marysville. My dad would even take the car up and park it in front of what became McCarthy's Pharmacy, was the A&P, and then park the car there, then walk home, so that we would have a good parking place on Saturday night or Friday night, and then we'd all walk back uptown. And my grandmother Shirk, Amrine, who was a Shirk maiden name, my mom's mom, because she lived with us until she died. Like we said, you didn't put people in nursing homes then. They all lived with you. And she would sit in the back seat and hold court and the window down. And everybody in the county came to town on Friday or Saturday night to do all their shopping and to just visit. And a big thing was they'd give you a dime and you could go down to Cheesy's, Earl Cheesy's ice cream place or candy store or Clancy's or something, and you could clean up with a dime. I mean, you thought you were in heaven, right?
Yeah.
And it was a different time that I think that...
About how many people were coming into the city at that time?
Well, in the city at that time, I don't know. I know when my wife and I moved back here in '68, there were only 5,000 people. So now we're talking about the 40s. So there was
maybe
probably
a couple
2,000.
thousand. Yeah.
Because we lived on the west edge of town when we moved to our new house, and it was called Sunnyside Edition at 511 West 8th Street, and that was the, quote, edge of town. And where I live now, we used to chase down one of our teacher's sheep in that field and round them up. Mrs. Westlake's sheep as kids. She'd pay us to go round them up. But that's where I live now. But
the whole county was probably, when we graduated, the county population was around 25,000. That's the whole county.
Yeah.
So back then, in the 40s.
Oh, yeah.
If there was, I bet you there wasn't 10,000 people in Union County.
See, because it was, and Marysville was a hub. You went shopping all the towns like Marysville, Bellefontaine, Marion, and that they were a hub that's where all the shops were. At one time downtown there was A&P, Kroger's, there were like 4 or 5 Springs, there were like 5 grocery stores.
Osmond's, Meats.
And meat markets, 2 theaters.
Yeah. Hotel.
A big hotel. Like now you go downtown, like just this weekend, last weekend, it was called the Avalon back then theater, closed and had been open for 120 years. But now because of travel and everything, you can get to these mega theaters with their sound where you can't hear for 4 weeks after you leave. But they've got the nice chairs and everything. They're only 15 minutes from us.
First movie I saw there, Mom took me, was the Glenn Miller story.
The Glenn Miller story?
And it cost Mom a dime for me to get in. A dime.
A dime, yeah. That's what it was. And it was...
that was very early, late 40s, early 50s.
But it was... Everybody trusted everybody back then. You always left your doors open, your windows open.
Yeah.
If you were going uptown, the door was left open, let the air come through the screen. It wasn't locked.
Dad took the keys out of the ignition, just put it in the ashtray.
Yeah.
In
You
the
left
car.
the keys in the car.
That's
Because
it.
nobody would think about stealing it. It completely... I'm glad I grew up in that era. And that because we didn't have any quote
Drug free.
fears. Drugs then was,
Alcohol.
oh my God, if you drank a beer in high school or you had a cigarette in high school, wow, you were really
A
in
bad guy,
trouble.
yeah.
And that was in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s even.
Well,
And then it started changing about
Mid-sixties.
61s,
yeah,
mid-60s.
yeah, after we got out.
After we got out of high school, it started changing, and I think it's gotten worse instead of better. But it was in the Depression. Everybody looked out for each other, and that's so.
Mom and Dad never told me any specific stories about the Depression. It's just that their habits from them just carried forward.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
My mom was so tight with money. I mean, my dad used to have a phrase that she squeezed a nickel so hard that the buffalo would crap. And everything. But she would hide it. But I can remember every year, Dad would say, "Well, I don't think we have the money to go on vacation this year," because vacation back then was a big thing.
Who got a vacation?
which was
Well,
doing what? Going to like Buckeye Lake or?
Oh well, or Cleveland Indians baseball. Remember you
Well,
go to
that's the
Cleveland
biggest trip.
Well,
My
you
family
went,
never had a vacation.
well, you went with
Never.
us. You went with us, Cleveland
To a
Indians.
game, yeah. But that's it.
Well, your dad didn't go on vacation.
We
No.
never.
But my dad would say we don't have the money to do that this
Yeah.
year, and all of a sudden, here would come my mom, and I can remember it was a pink quilted pouch that folded over that used to hold bath powder and things like this. But she would reach in there, and the only thing that was in there was a roll of bills that she had saved and hid. And she found vacation money. But because she had saved all that money, and we'd go to vacation, and if we went to the game, Max would go to the game.
But
And
farmers back in those
Yeah.
days, little farmers, 50-acre farmers, couldn't take a vacation.
mm-mm,
You got to milk the cows. You got to
7 days a week.
I mean, it's
7-day-a-week business.
a trip to Mulford Center was 5 miles, and I'll bet you,
Mm-hmm.
in my first 18 years of my life, I was never over there more except to play Little League baseball. Take that away. I'll bet you, I wasn't over there twice. If you went to Columbus, it was a weekend trip.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because the only place you could go to shop was downtown.
Lazarus.
Lazarus
Yeah.
downtown, and the movie. What's that movie that's out where they go down to see this Santa Claus? You know, the little kid goes down the slide, and guy wins that lamp.
Christmas Story.
Christmas Story. That was our life.
Yeah.
That's the way it was. The person who ever made that movie, I've always felt like he was following us around with a camera, my little brother and I, because it was just like that. And it was a major trip to go to Columbus, but that's where you went maybe once or twice a year because it was a long drive. It was just 2-lane road and you had to go all the way downtown Columbus. Or you would go to Marion.
There was no freeways.
What kind of car?
Oh, which year?
Well, that you have a memory.
They
of
always
this.
had. His dad always had a Dodge. I always had a Dodge.
Well, see, my dad finished school in the 6th grade because then he had to go to work. My dad was adopted, and that's going to be another story. But so he lucked out and was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, for which he had several patents and designs, and would, as you know, Max, he would train the college graduate engineers when they came in, and he graduated from the 6th grade. It was funny, but he would drive an hour and a half one way to work, so he got a new car every other year.
Yeah.
But the farthest I can remember back was a new car was a 1946 Ford. He had a Ford, and then he got rid of it and got a 19 50 Dodge. And that was, the Dodge dealer was down on East 4th Street, next to where the lawnmower repair place is now. And that, but yeah, we always had Dodges, but he got a new car every other year because he would have 100,000 miles on it because he drove an hour and a half to work and back every day to Dayton.
Yeah, I don't know how he did it.
We still don't know how he did it.
Narrow
And that-
2-lane roads.
But back to the Amrines, it's, I guess, the Amrines I was closest to or knew the best were, of course, my Aunt Vernie, and she had married Arnold Roush, and they had a farm, and I remember when I went out and bailed out at their place and that, and Max. Those were the two closest that we were to as relatives wise around here.
So Max, about your grandparents, like what memories do you have of your grandparents, or how many of them did you know?
Well, obviously they lived right up on Wolford Masker Road. They lived right next door, and he had a bathroom inside. So I loved to go up there and stay overnight because on the second floor he had an indoor bathroom with a tub.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh. Let's see. Grandpa George chewed tobacco. Of course, a lot of the farmers did back in those days. Had a big collection of license plates in his little garage. And I wish that all disappeared when they sold the farm while I was in the Navy. Sorry about
Max
that.
says
That's my dog, Barkley, outside.
It's on a security camera.
he has a security camera.
Yeah.
You want to?
Now they didn't have that when we were growing up.
Turn that volume down. That thing.
Security
up there.
cameras. We had dogs barking, but that was our security, was dogs. But
let's see. His wife's maiden name was Christ, and the Christ also go back in this area a long ways. And I'm sure Jim remembers Dalton, who repaired TVs.
yep.
But there's
You
a
walk
lot
into
of there's some stories. Like with the Lees, there's also stories with the Christs that we won't go into on this tape.
Why not?
We were never told
Why
the
not?
exact detail.
I'll tell you the exact detail.
Okay.
And I think we should go into it on the
Is
tape.
that right?
Well, yeah, I don't think anything wrong with it because it's all history, and the people are all dead. Then it was very scandalous. I mean, they talk about Tiger Woods, what's coming out of the woodwork now. Well,
If you had a child out of wedlock,
back then, if you had a child out of wedlock, Casey barred the door. Because I remember my mom, when her and dad got married, he was 20 and she was 16. So, as Mom said, everybody assumed because she was 16 that she was pregnant. And she kept telling them every year, the ones that were busybodies in the family, as she felt, she would tell them, said, well, did you mark it off your calendar? It's been 9 months. And she kept doing that. And they didn't, I wasn't born until 8 years later. They waited 8 years until they had income. And the reason they got married, so they could pool what they had, is what they did. And helped each other out. And then they were married 35 years because my dad died when he was 56. But what was I?
Well,
out
of wedlock.
Out of wedlock. Yeah, we've had some. Our great aunt, for example, had a daughter that my other two great aunts raised.
Kind of adopted,
and they kind of raised her because Uncle Dewey, he just happened to not be the father. You know what I mean? So they had a child that was named Charlotte. And Charlotte's dead now. Charlotte
lived down in Tennessee. I believe.
She was about our age, wasn't she? Or she was younger.
Oh, she was older.
Was she older than us?
A little bit older. Oh yeah.
Was she?
Yeah.
Okay. She was a little bit older than us. But we have had some members of the family that, as with any family, I think, you know, you were mentioning yesterday about wild oats. As we were going to, we had some family members that kind of played that game for a while, as my mom always said. But she would tell me
As a kid growing up, I never
these stories, and
never knew anything about it.
it was kind of funny. But my mom also said when her dad died, if it had not been, and this is the way families then took care of each other, if it hadn't been for my Aunt Nettie and Aunt Lottie, who were my grandfather's sisters, she wouldn't have had any clothes to wear. They wouldn't have known where some of their meals were going to come from. They always made sure that she had what she needed to live with.
And both those great aunts never had any kids. So,
And they never had any kids. And they both did extremely well financially.
How?
Aunt Lottie Coleman, her husband was big construction and had big road graders and things like that. And Aunt Howard Reed, Uncle Howard Reed, Aunt Nettie's husband, they lived down by Plain City, on Plain City Middleburg Road, and had a farm there. I don't know if he did anything other than the farming.
I think it was just farming.
I
He
think
shot
it
himself.
himself. But
When we were about
he killed himself. He had a brand new
10?
Oldsmobile, and got in the Oldsmobile and put a shotgun
in the garage.
in his mouth and pulled the trigger. And my mom said that it was because he was afraid somebody was going to get his money. That's what my mom always said. I
Mom
don't know
said
if
it
that's
because he had
that's
a
true.
lot of pain.
Yeah, see,
I
so
don't-
we
I don't
had
know.
several
I
stories
don't know.
coming out of that, but and then so Aunt Lottie and her husband died of natural causes. Aunt Lottie was head of housekeeping, if you will. I think that's what it's called, where they clean hospital rooms. She was the head of all the housekeeping at Ohio State University Hospital,
Yeah, yeah.
OSU Hospital. She lived on Olentangy River Road. Which, yeah, we both moan now because what that house,
If it was sitting there today, how much it
house
would
and
be worth.
property was worth when it was there and it sold, and what Aunt Nettie's farm was worth, and of course, all that inheritance went to Charlotte, the
All of
girl
it.
that was an illegal, not illegal, but was
Out of
the
wedlock.
Illegitimate.
out of wedlock child of Aunt Irene. So